talk introductory to the theme of education for discipleship, in which I'm going to be sharing with you some insights concerning the theory and practice of education from a Christian perspective, and laying the grounds for an introduction into the philosophy of Charles Mason and Christian Wall. But before we get into any of that, let me take care of a few preliminaries. This is being recorded so that people interested will watch it afterwards. So watch it. This talk is part of our church, Providence Reformed Church, and information concerning the fundraising can be found at providenceibc.org/donations. So if you go there, you will find updated information of everything that we're doing during these activities. The purpose of this fundraising is to raise money for the maintenance fund of our church, and there are, of course, various ways for you to help us. You can use the traditional way, send a check to our address. You can find our website, providenceibc.org, and our address is there. And then, if you go /donations, you will find two electronic ways. One is called Givelify, and the other is PayPal. So if you use any of those, you can find us and give your donation directly to us under our fund. And also, to all of you who are here present, thank you for being here. And make sure that you are in our YouTube subscription service. I'm going to go quickly over these works. Welcome back to the prayer. So now I'm addressing the donations. Make sure that you find us on YouTube. If you've received this link some other way, you can go to YouTube, search for Providence Reformed Episcopal Church, Providence IBC, Corpus Christi, and you will come to our Providence Reformed Episcopal Church channel. And then you go to the side and press where it says subscribe, that red button, and then it will appear like a bell on the side, and that bell press on it and tells you that you will be notified about every new video. So click on that, make sure that you click on that, and it will tell you you will get all notifications. And that if you do that, then every time that we do any of these conferences, you will receive a notice. And I'm going to ask you to forward this link and this information to your network in social media, if you use Facebook, Twitter, or any of the others, because that's going to be a very good, effective way of you helping us spread the word that we are doing this effort. So please subscribe and share in any of, feel free to share in as many as social media as you want. Today we're going to have a presentation about we'll end about 5, and then I'm going to open for questions. So feel free, if you have any questions, write them down. If you want to make questions that are going on, you're welcome to do that. But I'm going to try to be short. I'm not going to go as long. There's a lot of material that we address, and I'm not going to try to stop you with material. But I am very interested in your thoughts and your questions. So if you have any, write it down. And if there's people that are watching this later, you can send me your questions through email. My email is educationforthekingdom@gmail.com. So if you send educationforthekingdom@gmail.com, you will come to me and just write a question concerning the presentation, and I'll be happy happy to address it in a future presentation.
There's probably no spaces there, right?
Yeah, that's just for visual.
Right. There's no spaces when you type it out.
That's an email address.
Okay, all
So
right.
everything, small case, and
Right.
everything together. Education for the Kingdom at gmail.com. And also I have a blog where I put most of the information on Charles Mason that I have been sharing over the years. And it's called Education for the Kingdom.blogspot.com. It's at blogspot. So again, Education for the Kingdom. So if you search Education for the Kingdom at Benjamin Bernier, you probably come to most of these resources. Okay. So if I forgot anything and remember it, I will tell you. Okay. So now let us begin with a word of prayer. The Lord be with you.
Spirit.
O Father, who gave us the visible light as the first fruits of creation, is breathed into the face of man the intellectual light as the crown and consummation thereof. Guard and protect this word, which coming from thy goodness, returning to thy glory. Amen.
Amen.
So here we are in our presentation for today. We have titled Education for an Introduction to the Theory and Practice of Christian Education in light of the philosophy and work of Charles Mason and other educators. And although everybody that is here knows me pretty well, I often come across people that don't really know my background and how I got associated with the Charles Mason. So I would like to begin there shortly. Who I am and how I became acquainted with Charles Mason philosophy. I forgot that I had, this is my blog, Education for the Kingdom. Oh yes, I'm glad I did this because I forgot something very important. In my blog, if you go to Education for the Kingdom, you will find a series of articles that are called Education for the Kingdom, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, all the way to Part 5. And these are a series of articles that I wrote for another blog, which is called Charles Mason Poetry Blog, which is run by Art Middletop, who is a good friend of mine. And he had the kindness of asking me to write a summary of some of the things that I thought were more important concerning the religious background of Charles Mason. And I put that together in 5 articles. And it happens that in his blog, he has a podcast, and this coming week he's going to release that podcast. Monday, Tuesday, every day, one of them, all the way to Friday. So if you go to my blog, Education for the Kingdom, and click here, then that will get you to where those articles are. His blog is called charlottemasonpoetry.org. charlottemasonpoetry.org, and if you see at the top, you have this podcast click. So you click on podcast, and that will get you to your favorite podcast provider, so that you can hear the audio. It's the same articles that are written, but read. And there's a lot of information there that will be helpful. And I want to thank him, and that is there for you to take advantage of. The first one is called Education for the Kingdom, uncovering the essential religious foundation of Charles Mason's educational philosophy, which was the theme of my thesis. So now I'm going to go back a little bit to speak about myself. Uh, um, as you know, my name is Benjamin Bernier. I am the rector of Providence Reformed School Church, which is an Anglican parish of the Reformed School Church in Corpus Christi, Texas. And in the year 2000 to 2001, I had the privilege of going to study for my doctoral studies in Lancaster University in England. And the subject of my dissertation was the religious foundation of Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason was an English teacher who made herself into an English educational reformer and also into a profound Christian thinker concerning the philosophy of education. The reason that I became acquainted with her was because growing up in Puerto Rico, I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, my first language is Spanish. Growing in Puerto Rico and going all the way through the educational system, even though I had the benefit of private school and going to the main university in the island, I noticed that there was as a Christian, I noticed that there was a crisis in education. And I had no ideas of how to deal with it and how to move forward. So the education of our children forces us to look for alternatives and look deeper into these. So eventually this brought us to this commercial case of it through the work of Susan Schaeffer Macaulay. She's the daughter of Francis Schaeffer, one of the most important apologists in the 20th century. And in 1984, she wrote a book telling about the experience of her family in England when their children began to grow, and she started noticing a difficulties the effect of the school was having on her child was very negative, and she started looking for alternatives. And the solution came in the form of a school that was built upon the foundation of this educational reformer, Charlotte Mason. And then she tells us her story, and that she made a study of Charlotte Mason, and this is an incredibly good introduction. And through this book, actually, the work of Charlotte Mason was introduced into the United States, into the homeschooling movement. But most of the people, this was in the late 80s and during the 90s, yet most of the people did not realize that she was an Anglican. So they took whatever they could get from the book, which is very basic, and other people added as much as they could. But remember, this is pre-internet, so it was very hard to find anything about Charlotte Mason. So those were the early stages. So when I discovered Susan Schaeffer, and because my background is in philosophy, and I decided to go ahead and look for Charlotte Mason's own books, and she's published a series of books that's called the Home Education Series, 6 volumes, in which she collected her major works on education. And my first impression on reading her work was very positive and also shocking because of the quality of her writing and the level of her writing. She could stand side by side with any of the big names that I have read in philosophy and in educational philosophy in particular, and Locke, Rousseau. What she was saying was more profound, more Christian, and better said, and more relevant and more practical. And so my question was, why have somebody like this never been taught in any of the classes of educational or philosophy that I ever heard of. Nobody had heard that about her. So that triggered my curiosity, and so it made for a very good thing for research. And so, long story short, the combination of my research can be found in my thesis, which is Education for the Kingdom, an exploration of the religious foundation of Charles Mason educational philosophy. I had the privilege of being the first one to look deep into the foundation, the religion, as what the place of religion within her work and within her ideas. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit. And another byproduct of my work was the Scale House Meditations, which was when I was in England in the archive in the Army archive. I was surprised to find a series of Bible studies on the book of John. Mason had sent and written, and it's almost a Bible study on the book of John, in the first 6 chapter of the book of John, verse by verse. And Scale House, as you will see, is the name of the house in England, where she would have Sunday talks. And so these are transcripts of Sunday talks that she gave to her disciples, training teachers in the House of Education in Ambleside, which actually are highlighted as the heart or the essence, the soul of the training at that school. So those Sunday evening talks were very, very, very important. And we will discuss why they were important and how. So I was able to collect them for the first time and publish them all together. So that's Meditations, Scale House Meditation by Charles Mason, and with some annotations to help contemporary readers learn about the reference that she's making. So those are good resources to explore directly this lady's Christian view. And these books can be found on lulu.com. That's the cheapest price where you're going to find it. You can also find them through Amazon. But if you go to Lulu and search on Bernier, you'll find it. Okay, so we continue. If I was going to ask you, who do you think wrote the prayer that we began our session with? You might be surprised that this is a prayer of from the writings of Francis Bacon. And I used it deliberately in background of the subject that we're tackling to its proper level. If you are familiar with the name of Bacon, everybody recognizes him as a key figure in what would become the Enlightenment. And because of that, because his ideas were so influential into opening the doors of the new science, and eventually that went into elevating reason, most people don't gather the fact that he was working as a Christian for a Christian worldview, and that the method by which he wanted to improve was completely grounded, as he says in this prayer, but in the recognition that there is a pre-designed agreement between the works of God and the works of man in reproducing them for the glory of God. And we'll come back to this idea because it's important. But before that, let us consider the question of what is education. Oh, by the way, this is the context around which Bacon writes this prayer. He's speaking about the importance of fixing attention upon causes in nature. And then he goes, all depends on keeping the eye steadily fixed upon the facts of nature and so receiving their images simply as they are. For God forbid that we should give out a dream of our own imagination for the pattern of the world. Rather, may He graciously grant to us to write an apocalypse or true vision of the footsteps of the Creator imprinted on His creatures. Therefore do thou, O Father, who gave us the visible light, and that there comes the prayer, where He prays, the visible light as the first fruit of creation, and is breathed into the face of man, the intellectual light, as the crown and consummation thereof. Guard and protect this word, which coming from thy goodness returns to thy glory. So you see, yes, Bacon is emphasizing that we, in order to learn anything, have to pay attention to nature. And that was the big impulse to the new science. And instead of speculating about how things could be and making empty ideas, you had to force yourself not to imagine a false construct, but follow the pattern of. But when you hear about Bacon, you stay there, and you don't realize that he's also saying that they are there because God created it in such a way and created us in such a way so that we can know what is there. So that gives, in fact, a very strong foundation for observational science. And in fact, that's why the development of science is culturally and historically speaking grounded upon the influence of Christianity over culture. No other culture developed what we call modern science. Because no other culture, no other religion has this worldview that integrates God as creator and the man as a knowing person because he was created in his image. So one of the effects of the Protestant Reformation was in recognizing that there was these two books in which you could learn about God. You had the book of nature, know God through His works, which is what he's saying here, and Revelation, know God through His Word. So His works and His Word coincide, and through the study of both, you can attain the knowledge of God. And that gave a very strong impulse to a renewal of education, moving from the abstract and the speculative according to nature. So this is very important because this is the current that eventually leads to Charles Mason many hundred years later. But it is from this impulse that the best way to learn would be to learn by observing nature and the natural process by which people learn. Instead of inventing one, but adapting your method to the reality of the succession of causes, understanding the actual succession of causes, how the thing actually works, so that you can actually make it better. That was the impulse. That was what Bacon was trying to do. That was what his method was trying to do. Eventually people say, no, it really doesn't work, but the idea of finding the method that will best work was taken over and people improved upon it. And what that produced was a revolution of science, where instead of hitting dead ends, people began to do discoveries and discoveries and discoveries and discoveries, because the works of God turned out to be incredibly filled with profound knowledge and amazing complexity of causes and design. So that was what pushed the progress of science in our history, And one of the effects of that was upon education. Educationists began to think, okay, how do people learn? But according to nature. And therefore, there were educational reformers who tried to make education conforming to nature, and one of the results is that instead of being something that was forced, education became part of a natural process of acquisition of knowledge, because they observed that when children come into the world, they come with a very profound thirst for knowledge, and that is evident in their questions. The children will ask questions. What about this? And why this? Why that? What about that? They want definitions. They want words. They want concepts. They want explanations, and they are continually. So their brain is designed to acquire knowledge, and that was had been recognized in antiquity. But the new idea that came from these reformers was the idea also of stop forcing the child into the system and develop a method according to nature that responds to the nature of the child. Okay, so that's the guiding light, and it took a long time. If we have a chance, another time we'll talk about the pioneer on this method was called, or in this view, was called Comenius, and he was a bishop in the Moravian Church, and he suffered a lot of persecution during the 30 Years' War. His library was burned twice, and he had to escape up for his life. But he was the one who established all learning according to nature. But what I'm saying is that this follows with this vision that comes directly from the view of the Bible revealing and nature revealing God and His words, and therefore an education that responds. Remember, the other methods of education, whatever they are, similarly follow the premises of the cultures in which they were created. For example, in India, you have Hinduism. And what do you find in the educational system of India? Classes divided, where you don't have mixture of class. So you have an education for one class and an education for another class, and this is a caste system where everybody stays from grade to grade within their slot. So and also that it influenced your views of reality. You know that in Oriental religion, many they thought that the world is an illusion. So of course, if the world is an illusion, you're not going to look for cause and effect. So that's why in China and in many places they did a lot of discoveries, but they never systematically put them together, because they in a world where there is not a sovereign God that designed things for our good and us for Him, there is no need to find a useful tool from nature. You either fear nature or expect chaos. Okay? So you see, and that reflects in the educational model. The kind of education that is created is by the worldview. And this is very important. So we can conceive education as the process of handing down to the next generation the cumulative learning of a culture. So in a sense, education is a tool for conveying an inheritance. There's a treasure that has been accumulated of learning and understanding, and there is a process of handing that down so that those treasures are not lost to posterity. So education, in the big sense, can be seen as these instruments for knowledge transmission. And when we think of that, we, in light of what I just discussed, observe that through the scientific revolution and this foundation of unity between revelation and nature or creation, knowledge began to be increased very rapidly. And by the beginning of the 19th century, and this produced the foundation of all many new sciences. You know, you have the father of paleontology, the father of geology, the father of many sciences were developed during this period with this input. But as for a time it seemed that it was possible for a group of people to have encyclopedic knowledge of everything that is being added. And then that's where the encyclopedias began to be produced, and then as you find more things, you just add a new volume to the encyclopedia. And for a while, those projects were feasible as containing everything relevant that has been found. And that could be true, some people still think that something like that by the end of the 18th century, but the rate of accumulation of knowledge became such that by the beginning of the 19th century, the 1800s, you could not aspire at that universal knowledge anymore. And then you would have at the heads of each department one person that would have the reputation of covering everything relevant under his. But the idea of one man knowing everything, impossible. And that continued. So before the explosion of knowledge, it was the question of education was relatively simple because you only had to go through the 7 liberal arts in order and you covered everything that you have to cover. But when new knowledge began to be acquired, then a big question came, the question of selection and how you're going to convey this treasure. And that was in the 19th century, and then we're not talking about how it happened in the 20th. That became explosive. So it's exponential, and now you don't even think about a person knowing everything, even in his own field. Devoting all your time to reading everything that is even in one subject, you don't feel that you're going to be able to read everything. And then at the end of that process, then you have the internet with the explosion of information, where now you have so much information that you get stuck just deciding what to choose, who is worthy of my attention in the midst of so many voices claiming at the same time telling this. And then on top of that, you have new knowledge all the time. And that has created a very difficult challenge for the transmission of cultural achievement. Just by default, making a selection of curriculum, making a selection of what should be taught among all these is very difficult. Not only for the young, but also because of something else that happened in connection with this explosion of knowledge. And it's the negative side of the Enlightenment. Although it began with the foundation of a correlation between the works of God and the Word of God, it eventually exalted human interpretation and human reason as autonomous from that system, and began to undermine the foundation of revelation. And that created a crisis in Western culture. And eventually it began, the rationalists began to publish and became very influential in Germany, and they were pretty much resisted in general in theology, in English culture, but eventually by the 19th century, the seeds of rationalism began to be sown. And what that means is that people, educated people, instead of having this humble approach to the study of science, had the opposite and began to doubt the foundations of revelation and basically began to make atheist interpretations of reality, and science began to be shifted from a foundation of what God had revealed into whatever foundation our ideas can provide for it. And that's where the theory of evolution comes into play, to fit into the picture a plausible alternative explanation of how humans came here. So you see, what began with an exploration of nature ends revealing against the notion of a creator, and is used as evidence against that hypothesis that is now discarded. So you have a new thing that came into being, which is materialistic science, which is the one that we know. So in England, and I have to go quickly now, this created a crisis. This began to happen early in the 1800s and continued to progress. Darwin's 1859, and a lot of debate, but slowly, surely, that point of view began to be more and more expansive. Even though it was resistant, there was a lot of very erudite men from the previous generation that resisted that expansion. There was this impulse for the new and for progress, and the evolutionists were very effective in propagandizing their point. But that's kind of happens. It was kind of a pattern. And so in this context came the life of Charlotte Mason, who was as I said, an English woman. She was born in 1842 and died in 1923. So her years go side by side with what is called the Victorian era, which was the context in which this conflict began to be developed. And many people describe the religious atmosphere of the Victorian era as a crisis, where the foundations were being shaken. So you had side by side the traditional theological foundation of Anglicanism, the Church of England, with its institutions, its universities, and store of learning. But side by side, you had the rebels and the free thinkers and the skeptics and the undermining, and it was a real tension. And in the case of Charlotte Mason, she became an orphan when she was a teenager, and she had to fend for herself almost from the age of 16, 17. So she found a way forward by being one of the first trained teachers when England was doing educational reform, and she started as a teacher. But as far as we know, even though the records of her baptism were not found, and there's a very good book on Charlotte Mason's hidden heritage by Margaret Coombs, hidden heritage and educational influence of Charlotte Mason. So there's much that we do not know of details and on her, but as a teacher, she followed that view that I was telling you about finding a more effective way of teaching, and this not by theory but by actually observing people. So she devoted her life very much of trial and error to improve education and to read as much as he could in theory of how to find how does this work. And what I found that it doesn't come across on her works as clearly was that the guiding light for her to find what is best and the education that is according to nature was meditation upon what God reveals in Scripture concerning man and concerning us. So what she was doing all her life, all her youth, was reading Scripture and asking herself, what does that tells me about education? What does that tell me about children? What does that tell me about parents? What does it tell me about teachers? What about teaches me about language, about words, about subjects, about the role of God in education? So she developed a full-fledged Christian philosophy of education that is thoroughly grounded on these two principles: fidelity to the book of nature and fidelity to revelation. And in fact, she interpreted the book of nature in light of revelation, and that's what made what makes her work so important. And I'm going to, I think we have still time. I'm going to insert another interesting part, a very important part of this picture, because she found one of the keys that gave her an aha moment was by studying the writings of one of these big scientists, a doctorate in physiology, and his name was Paul Carpenter, and he was one of these erudite men that knew everything in his field. He had an amazing reputation. But importantly enough, one of the features of him is that he opposed Huxley's view. If you remember Thomas Huxley, he was one of the instruments in propagating the theory of evolution and its implications into human society and into humans. And one of the points of Huxley is that because humans are the product of evolution, the way that we should conceive of man is as an automaton. Because everything that is grounded in matter produces and is regulated by the process of cause and effect. And therefore, humans in their nature should not be different to any animal, and the thoughts and the will are simply illusions that form part of it. It seems to me to us that we are free, but actually we are being only acting what our molecules dictate. Like if we were billiard boards in a board, in other words, material determinism is the natural consequence of materialism in philosophy. So if you think that only matter exists, then spirit must be an illusion. But it's logical. It's a consistent logic. But Carpenter heard that, and a school of British philosophers reacted against that. On the other hand, the evolutionary view created a new view of man and a new psychology. In fact, it was called like that, experimental psychology, which will start examining man in terms of this action-reaction. Push here, have this effect. And that's what will eventually, in education, will get you into behaviorism, which is how can we program the machine? The children are machines, so education is about learning to program it right. So you push the right buttons, you have the right system, and you get that result. So that was the way that this new effect of education, in principle, negating the validity of spirit as a category, of human thought as a valid category. Before that, in philosophy, the spirit was taken for granted. You soul, the immortality of the soul, God, spirit. It was part of reality, and it was studied in metaphysics. And so, say, psychology was the study of the soul. But after Darwinism and materialism taking over, then psychology had to be redefined, where spirit does not exist. So, why is this important? Because the philosophy that Charles Mason embraced concerning how the brain works came from the work of this school of psychology that rejected determinism and adopted spirit as a basic principle of reality, and the will as an effective agent of change in nature. In fact, our will and our spirit are capable of producing change in the world, which is free, independent of its previous causes. And that's what makes it unique. So what is the spirit is a mystery, but that the spirit is really an efficient cause in the universe as we find it cannot be negated, and that then led them, okay, what is the interaction between mind and brain? And they did a lot of very acute observations on that area, which actually anticipated what we now know concerning the plasticity of the brain. These British psychologists knew it first. And so from that psychological theory, Charlotte Mason was able to find the insights that finally helped her produce a method according to nature based on the Word of God. So I think that's a good big intro. I'm going to stop there. She went on to live for 50 years after that, after publishing her results. Her first book, sharing what she had found in the psychological method and her experience as a teacher, was Home Education, giving counsel to mothers of how to teach daughters at home. And from 1986, and from then on, she went to establish a school, training school, a magazine for parents that is called the Parents Review. She edited these 1,000 a year pages all the way until her death. She moved to the north of England, Ambleside, the Lake District, and this is the parish that she would go every Sunday while she was healthy enough to go. She always suffered from weak constitution, so she had to rest a lot of times. So by the end of her life, she could not go to the church. But this is within walking distance of this house, which is the house that she and where she established the House of Education, where teachers were trained as governesses with her method. And she developed a full method that eventually created a school movement that influenced the whole of education. So I hope that helps us with the introduction. Now I'm going to allow for questions. Is there any question that you have?
I have one question. When you said her philosophy was that she was fidelity to nature and fidelity to revelation. Is that the entire scripture or the book of Revelation?
Entire scripture. Yeah. The Word of God as revealing God's thoughts and God's design for the world as the key to understand creation and nature. So the idea is that whatever you read in those books, whatever is true in the world, must be consistent with what God reveals in His Word, because God is the author of both. So there is no compatibility with them. The truth, as designed by God, between the world of the spirit and the reality that we see in the world. They actually correspond. See? So of course, this is a believing position. If you start from the other position, and a skeptical position, or an unbelieving position, then you don't really find any objective grounds to suppose that the world of thought is compatible with the world of accident and random causes. Because in the world of thought, what do you have? You have order, you have ideas. You see that there's design in the world of thought. There's logic, there are principles, there are laws. But in the world of random chance and effect, why would random chance and effect ever produce a system of ordered result? That's a big problem. And in fact, that's a big problem for materialistic science, and has really hindered the progress of knowledge because of that, not recognizing that the creation is speaking about the creator. So she did not have that problem. She, and remember, in her time, the culture was embracing, the elite culture was embracing evolutionary thinking. And she was very respectful for that. She was not what we would call a fundamentalist. But she always says, be careful, because between these two options, you have what God has revealed on one side and what man through investigation is revealing. And there's a difference between these two. This is always changing. So her advice was wait 50 years before saying that there's a contradiction between the book of nature and the book of God. Because the truth of science are always being updated. And so it's a very good advice. Actually, if she had lived long enough, she would have to say, wait 150 years. Because now it's becoming evident that the theory of evolution cannot explain for what we are finding. For example, the code of information within the DNA molecule. It's not like a code, it is a code, and it has been codified. So, how can you find codes that spring by themselves out of random causes? It's not going to happen. So, ironically, it has taken that long time to go back to what the thinkers before Darwinism were saying, is that the evidence for design is valid in the observation of nature. So this view is being vindicated once more. Charlotte Mason, hidden heritage and educational influence. Margaret.
One question.
Uh-huh.
When you're in that earlier slide where it says the problem, the root of the problem, what problem were you referring to?
The problem of education. The problem of transmitting the community heritage of the past to the next generation. And if you ask almost anybody that is with this on this equation, everybody looks at education and they will say, there's a crisis, there's a crisis, there's a crisis. And if you ask all people, they will tell you that the crisis has to do with the kind of worldview that was prevalent when I was learning, when I was being taught. It was so different to what is happening now. And the difference is for the bad, not for the better. So you have more access to information, but the quality of education is not as good, because education and information are not the same thing. Because education has to do with understanding and knowing truth. And in fact, our culture is moving to a position of relativism when we don't have any truth. So, and think about the implications for that. If there is no truth, then what is there to transmit? education becomes nothing more than manipulative propaganda, because there's no truth. So it's very dangerous to be in a culture where there's no truth, and that's why we're having so much trouble with fraud in economics, fraud in science. You know, the scientists that have been found falsifying their results, it's a huge problem. That is everywhere. Why? Because if you are continually being taught that there's no truth, there's no rules. The only rule is don't get caught. And it's survival of the fittest in that sense. So you see, our culture, the decay of worldview has implications into the process of education. And that's important also because in her case, she faces it's not the exact challenge, but it was a similar challenge. In principle, it's the same challenge, but down the road. You know, what happens if you continue to go that way? So what we see is that things have become worse and worse in terms, if you look in terms of God's revelation and in terms of right and wrong and in terms of knowledge of the truth. Our culture is in much worse shape than they were 200 years ago. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, a verse came to mind from Proverbs, and it's interpreted differently, very differently actually, by people, and it's Proverbs 22, where is it? Yeah, 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And one way of interpreting it is you force the child to, just in a very forceful, extremely disciplined way, you train that child to just make it go in the right single path. And when he's old, he won't depart from it. And then and there might be some truth to that interpretation, but then another interpretation is you train up the child according to the way that child has been, according to that child's nature. And then the child will learn better, and because you trained him kind of according to his nature, then he will not depart from it. Now, obviously, you can't go. There's issues with both interpretations because we have a sinful nature, so you can't totally train up a child according to his nature. But I'm just wondering. It sounds like Charlotte Mason would go with the second interpretation. The way you train up a child according to that child's nature. You help the child learn according to that child's nature, and that way the child will learn better and will retain the knowledge.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if is that indeed her outlook? And I'm also curious if you know if she ever made a comment about this verse in Proverbs.
Yes, I have come across reference to that, but I could not, out of top of my mind, I could not remember the particular her saying that.
Okay, all right.
But yes, her view is according to the nature, but it's really according to human nature, which is common to everybody. And in this, as I was saying, the first person that I am aware that enunciated this as a principle and work it out in practice so that the method would be more effective was Comenius. And Comenius was the first Comenius.
Okay.
He was the first person that used a picture book to teach Latin. And he observed that there is a relationship between language and meaning that was essential to facilitate learning. And so that's where he got the idea of a picture book where you had the word with the object. And so that's how do children learn a language? Well, they associate the word that what they're hearing with the action or the object. Okay, when they see the object, yes, and how? And what is that? They want to have the word. So that was the principle, and that's a good example of what he meant by according to nature. So he observed that. And that went directly opposite to the way of teaching Latin that was coming from the Middle Ages, where you memorize things without understanding. You just memorize. And at the end, eventually, when you start being able, there was some kind of a click, and you find, oh, now I get it, and then you can use all the toolbox that they got. But you had the memorization process without understanding. So the first person to challenge that and say, that's not natural. It happens, but you're creating pain unnecessarily. You can have the same results more effectively, less pain, if you just wait a little bit when the mind is more mature and the understanding goes with the word. So he developed a series of principles like those that guarantee an easement in the process of education. And then that created a tradition that eventually Mason grew upon, but more deeper, because she had a deeper, through the work of the psychologists, it turns out that they were right in their appreciation of how the brain works and how attention works. And that was what gave her the ability to create a method that was very, very effective in learning. And as far as I know, is revolutionary. The effects of the application of her method across the board were through years presented in public in the public in England as extraordinary. And you have people saying, I am amazed. I've never seen anything like it. Using her method, and it's because of she found a good method based on these principles that I described.
Now, the ancient writer's name, how do you spell it? Because it's a new one on me.
Comenius. Let me see if I can find it. John Amos Comenius. It's a Slavic name, so you're going to find different spellings.
Okay.
He wrote, so Comenius. That's how I found it.
Comeius. Okay.
N.
Comenius.
Okay, thank you.
John Amos Comenius.
And he was like around when?
During the 30 Years' War. So he.
Oh, so he's not ancient. Okay, 30 years ago.
Yeah,
Right.
during the 30 Years' War. In fact, he was invited to come to, I think, to England to try his system, but he refused, and I think he even received an invitation to come to America and be the founder, but he declined. And unfortunately, his work over time became hardly known. So the reference of Mason to Comenius are short, because Comenius only began to be studied late in the 1800s. So it's one of those thoughts that kind of gets lost. But his influence is very, very, very important during this time. As it not been for the 3 years war, he probably would have been able to be the most effective reformer. And many of the advances on popular education that were made much later would have probably been made earlier, because he had a very good understanding of nature. And again, he was based in spirituality, because the same thing was the book of nature, the book of the word.
See the gentleman whose library was burnt twice?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a Moravian bishop.
Oh, okay.
Yep. a very interesting story because in the Reformation, the Moravians have been already there for a long, long time. So there was a group of persecuted Christians that survived the Middle Ages with what we would call Reform ideas that were completely apart from any of the reformers. And he was part of that heritage. He was a bishop in that. So they had bishops going all the way back to ancient Christianity because there were Christians that fled to the mountains and had separated communities, and that's where the Moravians raised their roots. And they were persecuted in the Crusades and then the following years.
The persecuted just by the Roman Catholics or by both sides?
By Roman Catholics at that time.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, what other side?
Oh, well, there's some groups like the Anabaptists that everybody hated them.
Oh
Everybody
yeah,
persecuted
but
them.
that was later. That was
Oh,
later.
okay.
At that time, they were persecuted as heretics by the Roman Catholic Church because
Okay.
anybody, when the papacy began to exercise muscle over all the churches, anyone that not comply and was within the territory would get severely punished.
Okay.
And there was resistance even from the church. There were a lot of bishops that within the Roman Catholic Church, I think that I forgot the northern Italy that denounced the bad developments that were being accrued over time. That as the papacy became corrupted, it was there were faithful Christians giving the voice, both in Greece and in Rome. Some of them, not all of them, some of them had to flee for their life. Okay, so but that's a very interesting story, and it's important because these groups retained the Bible and read the Bible in Greek and taught the Bible to their children. So there was a tradition of Bible literacy that was preserved in the Moravian Church where Comenius came. So it was a small denomination, but it had pastors that were very well educated in Scripture. So that was part of what Comenius brought into this educational reform. So we're talking about 1600. So Charles Mason is 300 years after that, or 250 years after that. So there's a lot of order going on here. But it's good to have that background. Any other question? Okay, it's not. I think this is a good place to stop. And if you, I think there's some much more to say. So we might have one of these follow-ups if you're interested. We can have a second session, down the road sometime. For the time being, I'm going to make this available on the internet. If you have anybody that is interested, you can refer to this video and probably see. So I think this is a good place to ask. And if you're watching and you want to, let me recap. If you want to contact me, my email is educationforthekingdom@gmail.com, and you can send me any questions, and I'll be addressing them when I have an opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you.